Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here. Okay, let's get into it and talk about this week's episode. Have you ever dreamed of working at a league office like the NFL? What about being an executive who plans large-scale global events? You know, like the NFL draft or Super Bowl. This week's guest, Mary Pat Augenthaler, the former vice president of special events for the NFL, interviewed 5 or 6 times before she finally landed her first job with the NFL. She went on to have an outstanding 23-year career for the NFL. As she reflects back, she will inspire you what she learned along the way. We talk about going after what you want, what it feels like to be the only female in the room, and having a growing career and a growing family at the same time. I am so excited for you guys to hear our conversation. Let's do this. Mary Pat, welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Jahaan.
So you have had a legendary career, and I'm excited to jump into it. But before we do, take us back and tell us when you first fell in love with sports.
Oh, wow. I was not any sort of, amazing athlete. I certainly played sports as a kid, but, I wasn't one of the standouts, let's say. I think my first real memory of sports was, I'm going to date myself here, but was watching football, Cowboys Steelers, that sort of iconic dynasty and all their matchups. And I just remember being in, the family room of the house I grew up in and watching with, I have a bunch of older siblings and watching with them. And, it was part of the fabric of our life, not in a way where sports ruled everything, but it was exactly what I think sports does for so many people. And it's this recreation, this escape, this super fun and exciting, reality TV to watch. So I'm going to say it was, in my elementary school years in the late 70s.
Oh. That's funny. I also loved the Cowboys and that dynasty.
Yes, it was what we all talked about at that time. It was exciting.
Mm-hmm. And I was certainly a bandwagon fan, but that's okay.
Me too.
I couldn't help myself, but mainly because my older brother, loved watching it.
That's certainly what drew me to it, was like the family experience of it. I was young enough maybe to not go in and turn on football, but some of my siblings or whoever was in our house, because it was, could be busy at times, was the one who, that's the Cowboys Steelers is just what really is my most vivid memory of sports growing up.
I know you went to Boston College.
Did.
When did you make that realization that you wanted to work in sports?
Very good question. So I went to BC. I was an English major. I'm from a BC legacy family, so I'm 5th out of 6 kids to go. I didn't go there with any sort of plan per se. I was sort of going to college. And when I graduated, a lot of my older siblings and some mentors that were very close to me were steering me in the direction maybe of teaching and education. And it wasn't that I didn't want to do it. I just didn't feel super passionate about it. So I graduated from school and I didn't really know what I was going to do. And like I said, I was an English major, and, some people now would say, what the heck are you going to do with that? But that was what I was good at and what I enjoyed. And one of my best friends from Boston College, who was a year ahead of me there, she worked at a small agency in New York called SportsLink. And she said, why don't you come in? It's like sports marketing. It was early 90s. It was like sort of a thing in its own sort of small pioneer industry and being officially called something, but it wasn't, what everybody did and where everybody was going. And through my connection with her, I was hired at SportsLink as a receptionist in January of 1992 by Rob Ingram, who was, one of officially my first work mentor. And we worked primarily on baseball and on soccer. It was a very small company. And Jahaan, I did zero that had to do with sports. I typed memos and I had the plants watered and I made sure that the pantry was stocked. And then every once in a while they, would give me something to do and to write a letter, which I could do because I was an English major, right? And I learned, when I say from the ground up, I'm sorry, my phone's ringing. When I say from the ground up, that's really how I learned. I learned how to answer a phone and connect people politely and develop those sort of relationships. From that, I said, oh, okay, I think I like special events. And I remember talking to one of my older brothers. And when I said, I think I want to do special events, and he was 15 or 18 years my senior. So he had seen a lot more than I had seen, when I was 22. And he just said, Mary Pat, that it's a thankless job. You do not want to do that. You're the one that's there early. You're the one that's working late. And we went through this whole discussion. And I thought, I know, but there's something about it that I thought I could be good at. And I can't quite put my finger on what that was, but I was drawn to it. So when I was at SportsLink, we put on soccer events and we put on different events for Major League and minor league baseball. And I really found that thing that I was good at. It was organization and keeping lists and all of those things and ticking off things. I am one of those people, Jahaan. If you give me one thing to do, it will take me literally all day long to do it. If you give me 10 things to do or 100 things to do, they're done in 2 hours. I thrive on being busy and the pressure. I like all of that, as opposed to feeling like, oh, well, I can do that later. I can put things off when I only have a little bit to do. So that was my first real parlay. And I actually got to work with one of my best friends, Kendra, for a few years. She was obviously a little bit more advanced than me. And then through that job, so Rob Ingram, who was my first boss, he was married to a woman named June Mitchell, who worked at the NFL in the special events department, doing something that I sort of, decided I had really wanted and, was dreaming about doing. And that their connection and their marriage was essentially what got me the interview originally at the NFL. And 23 years later, I was still there. So, a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck, if I'm being completely honest about it.
Mm-hmm. What made you want to, it's the NFL, right? But what made you want to make that jump from where you were to the NFL? Did you have your sights on something bigger than
I did. SportsLink was wonderful. And my boss used to call it, he used to say, it's like business school without the tuition. Because we were all young, we were all growing. He was a teacher before he even went into sports marketing. So he was like the consummate teacher and would spend the time with, there were probably 8, 9, 10 of us, and teaching us how to do things the right way with integrity, being diplomatic, and all of those qualities and things that you need. And then there's a time where you outgrow that a little bit, right? So then I had done that for a few years and sort of felt like I want to take a leap to something bigger. Now, the NFL is certainly a giant leap. I did not realize how big that was at that time when I was, 25. Mm-hmm. And my funny story about being hired at the NFL is I interviewed there, 5 or 6 times for 5 or 6 different jobs. And the first one I went to, they wound up not taking the job off the docket. And they said, we're not hiring for this position anymore. And I can remember having a talk with my mom and saying, I think you only get one kick at the can here. And mine's sort of done now. And then I got interviewed for another job. And then and that one went to someone internally. And then I was interviewed for another job. And the one that I was hired for at the time was a part-time job as a manager of television events. I had no idea what television events were. I would have been leaving a full-time job for a part-time job. And I can remember telling my mom, if it's part-time, I'm going to take it. And she was like, but you can't. I lived in New York with, a friend from growing up. And she was like, how are you going to pay your rent? I was like, Mom, I'll figure it out. But if they hire me for a part-time job, I'm going to take it. I interview for it. They call me back the next day. And as luck would have it, they say, you know what? It's a full-time job now. We just realized that we need more. And long story short, after, months of interviewing for multiple jobs, that was my first job. I was hired by Jeff McMahon, who is, no longer in the business, but his father was Ed McMahon of late night television. And Don Garber was my boss, who is now the commissioner of Major League Soccer. He was the ultimate person that, that gave me the offer to work in the events department there.
The job was part-time. And if you had looked at it and said, this isn't for me, I can't afford a part-time job.
I was going to figure it out. I don't know what I was going to do, but I was going to figure it out.
And you didn't listen to your mom, and she didn't validate any fears you had. She
was pretty much saying, I'm not making up the difference in a gentle.
You know what? I heard that in between the lines. I was like, I know what she meant.
Yes. She was sort of like, okay, if that's what you're going to do.
Okay. So now you get in, you are a manager level. Share with everybody what your last role was and who you did it for.
I was vice president of the special events. And what I did was I worked on mostly, not all, but mostly our fan facing events. So things like Super Bowl experience and the draft experience. And I also worked on some little bit more private things like the Super Bowl NFL tailgate party. And I worked on the NFL House, which is a hospitality piece that is part of Super Bowl. I mean, there's a lot of things I touched over the years too. Some of them have disappeared. I mean, I started working on NFL Air It Out, which was like grassroots flag football. And then the stadium, what we call the stadium campus, it's essentially how we are going to move people in and out of the Super Bowl stadium on game day as a level 1 national security event, which obviously takes a lot more coordination and is just very different than, let's say, a regular season game.
No doubt this is a competitive industry, right?
Yeah.
And it took you 5 times to get in. So how did you go from a manager to an executive and being known as the woman who moved the draft from New York to Chicago? Yes, I'm using that headline. I remember when I saw that, I was like, that's amazing.
When I look back, it seems to make a lot more sense than maybe it did to me at the time. But look, I was 26 years old, Jahaan. I was just happy to be hired. I was willing to do whatever they wanted me to do for my television job. So I started putting on made-for-TV events. And events like the Lineman Challenge and Battle of the Gridiron that was around Pro Bowl. And the marquee event at the time was the Quarterback Challenge, which, if you're a little older than you are, but you're my age, you know what the Quarterback Challenge was. And it was, that special that came on in the summer where you watch the top guys compete in, fun drills.
Uh-huh.
And I just was like, I'm just going to do this at the best that I can. And I was young, a woman in a male-dominated industry, but I would say that those circumstances actually helped me blossom at the NFL and helped me grow there, as opposed to holding me back. I mean, there's many times that I was the only woman in the room. We'd have quarterback club meetings, and I would be the only woman in the room, and the person who would open up the meeting would say, "Gentlemen," and that was sort of like everyone's cue to be quiet, and he'd say, "And Mary Pat." Right? And everyone knew who I was. Everyone in that room knew immediately, oh, that's Mary Pat, right? She's the only woman here. I never felt intimidated. I felt accepted. I felt relied on. So just by, year over year of growing, and I worked hard and they gave me more to do. And I was certainly tested a number of times there, whether I realized it at the time or not. I was pushed into some things that, for example, at the time I worked for a gentleman by the name of David Newman. David was at the NFL for a long time, and he was at the New York Mets for a long time. And he came in and said to me, I was sort of at a, I don't want to say a rough patch, but I was at a frustrating patch of my career at the time. I felt like I could do more. I wanted to do more, but there was somebody above me, and I felt like I could do it a little bit better. And he saw that and knew that I was working hard and putting my time in and growing. And so he said to me, this was the Super Bowl in Atlanta 2 times ago. Okay, so I'm going to date myself. That was not even 2000. Before that, 90, I don't remember. Maybe it was 2000. And he sort of dangled the carrot and said, like, if you do X, I'll see if I can do something for you, sort of thing. And that's really all I needed. Because I just thought I'm never going to have him be in a position where he's not going to say whether it was a promotion or whether it was a raise or whatever it was at the time. I just said, I'm doing this. And when I tell you, I could have done a timeshare in Atlanta. I went down maybe even once a week, 2 to 3 times a month, if not more, from September until January. And Super Bowl was in January at the time. There was a countdown clock there. And every time you'd land at the airport and you'd drive into the stadium, you'd see this countdown clock. And I loathe countdown clocks because I would see it all the time and think, oh God, what if I don't get this done? And he nurtured and he saw my want. And then when I'd go to him and say, I think I messed this up. And he'd say, no, you didn't, like here, and he'd sort of be able to sort of bring me back, or I'd say, look, I did this, and should I have, or shouldn't I have? So I always had someone from my bosses that helped me grow at the right time in my life. And again, you don't get that perspective until you look in the rearview mirror. When I first started, and Don Garber hired me, and then he moved to the international department, and I worked for David for 5 years. And he was a taskmaster, and he was exactly what I needed to become, a familiar name at the league, and to have people outside the league, and whether it was vendors or sponsors, to have them get to know me and trust me. David gave me that push. And I think I worked for him for about 5 years. And then I worked for a gentleman by the name of Jim Steeg, who is, a legend in the sports industry and ran so many Super Bowls. And I was sort of the new kid on the block when I worked with him. I had just gotten married. I was starting a family, and Jim his kids were grown, and we were certainly at different phases of our life. And he sort of said, okay, like I get that you want to do this, and let me help you in more of a laid back way. Like I used to always go in and say, bye, I'm leaving. And he would come in and say, why are you saying you can go? You can just go. And I'd say, I can't. I've been trained to come in and check in when I'm leaving. And he was like, and he would come in and he'd say, I'd stand at his door and he'd say, let me guess, you're going home now. And I'd say, yes, good night. And it became like this joke between the two of us. So I can remember I had my oldest daughter. She was probably, 10 or 11 months old. And I had to go to Pro Bowl to do work. And my husband couldn't come with me because he was working. So one of my older sisters was coming. And Jim was the one who said, okay, when you book your flight, you want to get the seat right behind the bulkhead, because that way the baby will have more room because, she's sitting up and this. And I remember thinking, this coming from a guy who has grown kids who were, in college, but he said, this is what I used to do. So it just showed me that he cared where I was. I got help along the way when I felt like, I was maybe floundering a little bit trying to balance home and work. And then I worked for Frank Zapovitz for 9 years. And that was when I was, having my family. My kids were little, and Frank had a family, and he was a huge family guy, and he understood it. So that's when I started, moving on to working and doing more of a flexible, work arrangement, and that went on successfully for a while. And then I worked for Peter O'Reilly for my last 5 years there. And Peter and I are colleagues, and we are, about the same age. I'm a little bit older than he is, but we have kids that are the same age. So he knew, like, I want to be able to get to that basketball game, or I want to be able to go to that lacrosse game. And he got it. So he wanted to go to his kids' games too. So, looking back, they were all the right bosses for me at the right time. I may not have thought that, but when you do, have a little perspective with age and, retirement, you could say, you know what, that somebody was watching out for me because all of that worked really well and people were patient with me. And as a result, I think I just worked harder for them.
Yes, I'm working harder for them because they value you, right?
And they were very clear. I knew that. So that just made me, I never would wanted to disappoint.
What I'm hearing you say is you had a lot of supportive bosses that were male. And for women who are new moms or thinking about starting a family and are a little intimidated, right? Yeah. Not sure what to ask. And I think what happens a lot is we make up a story in our head before we even ask the question, right? That happens all the time. So what advice would you give to women who are, I want to work and I want to also raise a family? What would you tell them?
Okay, my first piece of advice would be patient with yourself, right? There are some days when everything works smoothly and I would think, I could do this for the rest of my life. And then the wheels come off. Somebody is sick with croup. Somebody has, got sick at school. And there were those days that I'd be like, I can't go back to work again tomorrow. I can't do this. And so what I would tell women especially is just be patient with yourself. It's a little bit of a roller coaster, and that's okay. It's like that for everyone. I don't care if you're the head executive in the boardroom or you are the person who has just started, right out of school. It's the same for everyone. It's not unique to what women go through. Working and balancing family is unique to no one. It is what everyone struggles with. My second piece of advice would say, don't be afraid to ask. But when you ask, you have to be honest with yourself and what you want and with the person to whom you're speaking. So I'll give you an example. I had my oldest daughter, Anna, and I was working 5 days a week, and I really wanted to scale back and work 1 day a week from home. Honestly, Jahaan, I don't know how long it took me to even have the conversation with my boss, who was Frank Sapovitz at the time, but it was probably way longer than it ever really needed to be. And I went back and forth with my husband, and I thought, okay, if they don't give this to me, I've got to be ready to say that I'm leaving. And I attached so much drama to this conversation in my mind. I eventually got the courage to go in to Frank and ask him, and he said, sure. We probably just need to check it with HR. So why don't you set up a meeting with them? And I came out like, I had to splash water on my face because I was sweating. I was so nervous. So I set up the meeting with a woman who was running our HR at the time. Her name was Nancy Gill. And same thing, the build up, the lead up. I am sweating through my suit. I'm thinking that this is going to be, the most tense, potentially worst conversation I've ever had. And her answer was sure. Are you looking for any more time or is it just 1 day? And I was so thrown that she asked me if it was only 1 day or more. I couldn't even answer that question because I was like, I had 1 day so drilled into my mind and I wound up sticking with that 1 day. But I remember leaving and thinking, gosh, I made that out to be so much harder. And I got lucky. It went great for me. And I just kept thinking to myself, what if I never asked? What if I got myself so psyched out and so convinced that it was going to go a certain way that I never asked? And then guess what? I asked for another day from home a couple years later when my next daughter was born. And I wound up working from home 1 day, having 1 day off a week that I quote unquote didn't work. Now, I described that as I was not paid for the work I did that day, which everybody would laugh at because they were like, oh, okay. The choice between time and money for me grew as my children's lives progressed. And it wasn't necessarily for me about, making as much money or getting that biggest raise. It was more about how can I do this successfully and get what I want and might need out of work and be there for my kids. And that's what the NFL helped me do. I mean, literally all the way through, my 23 years there up until, my retirement and that conversation with my boss. I mean, that took me years to get up the real readiness and courage to say. And it was I don't want to say it was welcome, but it was Peter understood where I was and what felt like I was missing as my high schooler's time was timing out, and she was going to go to school. So I guess if you don't ask, you'll never know what the answer might be. And look, and then my next piece is being honest. I went in there and I never told anyone that I was talking to anything but the truth, whether it was hard to say or whether it was my truth at the time. And here's where my head is, and here's where I want to be, and here's what I feel like I need. And I didn't beat around the bush. I mean, you know me, I'm direct. I mean, I've been called a lot of things in my days, and, I don't beat around the bush. And that probably helped me when someone might have said, oh, well, what about this? And I'd say, well, that's not really going to work for me. I was very sure of what I needed and wanted before I went in.
Ooh, all right, you're giving us a lot of good stuff here. So you were very sure about what you needed before you went in.
At that time, yes.
At that time. How are you making these decisions? Who are you leaning on? Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to, obviously, my husband. I'm trying to talk to no one at work because I didn't want to put my burden or whatever I was going through at that time and have that be on anybody. I'm talking to siblings and close friends. It probably would have helped me to choose to talk to someone that was going through it at the same time as me. I know I was a sounding board for a lot of people. It probably would have helped me because it's easy for me to, let's say, talk to you. Well, you don't work there. So you don't know sort of the people that I'm talking about or the position that I'm exactly in. But I just never felt like I wanted to sort of share that, especially in the beginning when I was younger. So I had a lot of people that I bounced things off and a lot of people rooting for me. But most of the time I told the folks that I worked with and, outside the company and inside the company, I told them all after. I could say oh, you know what, I'm going to be working from home, 2 days a week or, that sort of thing. But they knew how important it was to me. It's just something that I shared after the fact.
Okay, good. So you're talking to your husband. You stayed away from talking to people at work.
As much as I could. In my memory, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and relied on other people outside of work and your network and your
other friends that were executives, other friends that were, just good friends that have known me for a long time, college roommates, that sort of thing, siblings.
Hey, Jahaan here. I hope you're enjoying the interview. I am sure you are thinking about your own career right now and how you can pull out in front of the pack to take your career to the next level. For 18 years, supporting women in sports has been my favorite part of my career, and I would love to support you. Whether it's joining my free Game of Her Own community or one of my one-on-one coaching programs, I am here for you. Send me a message at jblake@jahaanblake.com or DM me on Instagram @jahaanblake, and let's schedule a time to have a free session. I cannot wait to hear from you. All right, let's get back to why you're here. So let's go back to this advice, which I love. So I'm hearing for new moms or moms who are working now and trying to get it together. So be patient with yourself.
Yes.
This is not unique to just you. You're not alone, is what I'm hearing. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want.
Right.
Have that courage and try to refrain from having so much drama, causing so much drama around that question, right? Careful of the story that you're making up in your head as to how they're going to respond. And then being honest with yourself and then getting what you need and what you want out of work that works for you, that serves you and your family.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. That's good advice. So will you talk a little bit about what led to retirement?
Sure. Okay. So I really grew up at the NFL. I did. I started there when I was 26 years old. I was young. I was single. I was living in the city. I met my husband there. We got married. I had 2 kids. And if I'm being completely honest, I never had a real plan. I never said, if anything, I said, I think I'll work until my oldest daughter, Anna, is in kindergarten. I mean, I left after her freshman year of high school. So that just goes to show how much I wasn't. And the irony of that is that I was an event planner. So I was planning all these other parts of my life and, my work, but not really like the most important of how long am I going to work? And when you work on Super Bowls and drafts and other really, big NFL events, you sort of get committed years before. We'd work on the bid process for Super Bowls, and you get to know all the people in the bid. And then you sort of feel like, I want to see that one out, right? Like that was an exciting part, and those people are really great, and we're going to do a great game there, in 5 years, right? That's sort of how far our planning became.
Right.
So I was thinking about it. I knew that when my oldest daughter started high school, it was going to be different, right? Because, in high school, you play sports after school. Everything isn't on Saturdays and Sundays anymore. That's the way it is, a lot of times in elementary school. And I felt like I was ramping up because I felt like I didn't want to leave the NFL or stay at the NFL and have any regrets. And I say that by, so I when I officially left, my oldest was just finished her freshman year of high school. And when I looked out for our family, let's say, I saw she's going to be a sophomore, junior. All we're going to do is like talk about where you're going to, going to college. And she was going to be gone. And I didn't want to say, oh gosh, I was in Tampa a lot. I was in Miami a lot. I was in, and just LA, and I didn't want to look back and think, oh God, she's gone to school now. She might never come back home. And I sort of wasn't really around, don't get me wrong, I was around, but you're on planes a lot. Let's be honest, right? There's a lot of work and time that goes into planning events. So it was a ramp up for me. Again, not something that I verbalized at my office, all the time, but it was, a plan that my husband and I had sort of said, like, I think this is when I'll be ready. And when I looked at that, if I could sort of take the emotional part out of that and look at it, there were so many good, talented, smart people behind me, and I sort of needed to step out of the way. I mean, it's not a reason for retirement by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a byproduct of a decision that I was coming to that would have been a good thing for a lot of people. And I felt good about that. That was something that was important to me. I never, ever wanted to leave the NFL and just say, oh, let me sit down with my old boss, Peter, and say, I'm going to go. And here's my 2 weeks. That was not the way I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave with them knowing where my head was, with a plan, with do you need my help on the way out sort of thing. I was one of the most senior people in my department who had gone through, all these games and had all this sort of institutional knowledge. And there's a value to that I knew because people before me had done, similarly. And I just wasn't ever going to pull the rug out and be like, by the way, I'm going to go now. So I had a real honest conversation that, was a year and a half in the making of, okay, so this is going to be sort of my time to go and give them a chance to sort of set up the next iteration of what the events department was going to look like and not have to do that, spur of the moment and scrambling. That wasn't what I felt was fair and not what I wanted part of my legacy when I left the NFL to be. Uh-huh. So the decision came from a very personal level for me and my kids' age and timing. And it became sort of, how do I marry this with the best way and timing to leave at the NFL? And so I wound up leaving after the Atlanta Super Bowl. I left that May, but with a very calculated, okay, I'm going to turn this over and I'm going to teach, this something that I do every year that no one might even know because I just do it at Super Bowl. I needed to share that, right? So it was about bringing others up and lifting them up to share the information that I knew they needed to move on to the next.
I can only imagine that was such a grueling, hard decision to make, but it sounds like you made it just the way you made all of your other decisions during your career. And you were just honest with yourself, right? Talk to your husband, your friends, your family, and just once you decided you were going to do it, then the event planner came out in you, it sounds like, and you planned.
How do we sort of formulate this so it works for everyone? Look, I was ready. I was emotionally ready, but I'm not going to lie. I had no idea how draining and hard it was going to be to leave. I mean, the first conversation I had with my boss, I was crying. I mean, think about that. I initiated the conversation. This was what I wanted to do. Yet I was like, it's hard for me to get the words out. I can remember. And he's like, oh my gosh, where's she going with this? Like, what is she even going to say? And then leaving. And look, I was very thankful. I stayed, and people knew that I was leaving. And I got to say goodbye to a lot of people that, you see every year, but you don't necessarily see everybody. So I had this very long goodbye that I am certainly grateful for, because had I just said, oh, I'm not going to come back, and I would have never been able to say goodbye to people that I've worked with for over 20 years, that I am friends with, that I, value our time, together. So they helped me really plan. And when I say they, I mean, my bosses and the leaders at the NFL, they helped me plan like a really positive exit experience.
Okay. I love that. So it was draining. It was hard. What I like about this conversation is that some of my clients I've talked to, and they say, I don't know if I want to go for this. I don't want to apply for this executive position because I want to have a family someday, and I don't know if it'll work. And what I'm hearing from you is like, you had no plan. Like, you had your children, and you relied on you had great support internally, and you didn't know if you were going to, right? Like, just looking back, that you did. And it's not a reason not to apply for the position. It's also not a reason for you not to have a family either.
No, of course. Right? There's a way to live. I guess my advice would be is don't ever not go for the next thing, because you don't know how the rest of everything is going to fit together until it's actually fit together. So when you make those big decisions, don't make them in advance, like looking down a runway. Make them in the moment of, okay, you know what? I got this big job. I'm having twins. I'm going to see how this goes right after. And maybe it goes great. Maybe it doesn't, but at least live it out a little bit and give yourself a chance to say, this is for me or this isn't for me. I think doing that before to say, maybe I shouldn't try to have a baby now is, I'll be totally honest, and you can keep this in or you can cut it out. You can cut it out. My first pregnancy was a miscarriage. And I was due like 2 days after the Super Bowl. When it was in January, I worked for Jim Steeg, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, of all the chances, but it was what it was. And guess what? I wound up having a miscarriage. It wasn't that I certainly didn't want it to happen that way, but it's just the way things happen sometimes sort of helps you figure things out for yourself. So there was never a time that I was like, oh, I'm not going to. I mean, look, I was promoted to vice president, and I was on maternity leave with my second daughter. Jahaan, I was boiling bottles, old school.
Wow, I love this.
Boiling bottles. And my boss called, and I was like, oh my gosh, what, Frank? Like, because I was on maternity leave, you're not, and so I have like all the bottles in this huge pot, and he says, congratulations, Miss Vice President. And I'm like, I'm sorry? Now, if you had asked me before that, I probably would have said what I'm telling people not to say. I was a senior director. I was at a good place. I had a lot of responsibility. I loved my job. I was happy. And he called, and I was like, wait, what? Like, I sort of knew there might be some promotions coming. I certainly didn't think I was, in the running and again, it wasn't top of mind. I was managing 2 kids and trying to figure out life at home. And I remember hanging up and being like, wait, what? You literally couldn't have made it up with the fact that I'm like, in my pajamas, boiling bottles, and he's saying, hi, Miss Vice President. And I was like, I'm sorry. So I went back, and I was always going back, but you don't tell anybody that you're coming back. You just sort of appear or don't appear. And so Lily was young. She was a baby when I was doing Super Bowl in Arizona that following year. And I thought, I don't know, how am I going to do this? She was born in June. She may be 6 months old. I can't bring her. That's too crazy. And I made my own decision to go to Super Bowl. I trimmed down my time a little bit, but I made my own decision that I was going to leave my little ones home that year and go. And look, it was hard. I'm not going to lie. Was I upset sometimes? I'm sure I was. Was I getting through? But it was my decision that whether or not it was a mistake or not, it was mine. It was not the company's decision. It was not it. And look, there were many other years, Jahaan, I used to fly home during the break in between when like NFL Experience at the time it was called wasn't open, I would fly home for Monday and Tuesday on my own dime and fly home to see my kids who were too little to bring because it was just too much for my husband, to get everybody there. Everyone's in diapers and bottles and pacifiers. And I would come home so I could see my kids could see me. So I did stuff that worked for me. And I guess my advice would be find what works for you. Look, there is nothing wrong with having children at home of any age and being away for a work trip and enjoying a room service meal or a dinner with your friends and a glass of wine and no distractions and no one, needing you for anything. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Some people don't mind it, and other people it wasn't for them. You'll never know unless you try. Right? My first work back after I had Anna. So I had my daughter in March. My mother got very ill during it. I had to extend my maternity leave because we were trying to figure out like how my mom had to go to rehab after having like multiple strokes. And I extended my maternity leave by 2 weeks. My first day back to work was a Super Bowl planning trip to Jacksonville. Okay. I didn't think I could do it. I'm never going to be able to get on that plane. Emotionally, I was in turmoil. I was leaving my baby. My mom was sick. I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I get on the plane, I go to Jacksonville. I'm crying the whole flight. I'm flying by myself. I'm flying in a little bit later than everybody else because my schedule is a little different. And I remember thinking back two things. One, when I got there, the welcome that I got from people, whether they were super close friends of mine or not, was amazing and made me feel like I definitely made the right decision. I'm in the right place. And then it made my husband to figure it all out pretty darn quick, right? So I was gone for 3 days and he's up, giving bottles and doing this. And guess what? All of a sudden I've got, a husband who's super hands-on because that's what our lives dictated at the time. Would I set it up that way for someone? No, but I did it and you can get through it and it worked, right? She was a baby then and I retired when she was 15. So,
it sounds like it wasn't perfect, right? It's perfect. No. It's not perfect for anybody, but you made it work. And what I'm hearing is the underlying thing is that you were happy at work. You liked what you were doing.
I loved my job. And for someone who cried the whole way and the whole flight to Jacksonville, to walk into that room and see my friends, my colleagues, and have a role, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to leave those tears behind. Some advice that a friend of mine gave me. How did she say it? A couple of things. One was don't coach from the road. So it was, don't call my husband and say, oh, did you do this? Did you do this? It was going to be the way it was going to be when he was in charge. And I needed to just be okay with that. And the other piece was keep your head where your feet are. And so it was when you're in Jacksonville or when you're planning, that's where you are. You're not saying, oh, I wish I was here. I need to be home or I have to do this or some of that happens, but you sort of have to keep your focus, I think is what it was saying. So that was like two things that a friend of mine said to me, or two friends, at separate times. That was like when I was saying he fed her spinach and I wanted her to have peas. And they were like, yeah, okay, Mary Pat, don't coach from the road, right? Because, I'm an event person. I'm a control person, right? And then the other one was keep your head where your feet are. And I was like, okay, I get it.
That's great advice. I could talk to you about family, and I don't even have children, but family and managing that whole entire thing in your career. But I want to go backwards for a minute. This is just how my brain works. You said something really interesting about, I think you were working for David at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said something about you saw a role that you wanted and you went in and told him this is what I want. So talk more about that. What is it like to go in, or what advice would you give women to go in and speak up, use your voice and advocate for yourself for exactly what you want?
Right. I mean, here's what I would say. I was lucky that the bosses that I had maybe it's just the events world, but I had a real, a friendship with them. We could tease each other. We understood each other. I always say when you work in the events world, you can usually sit down at a dinner table and order for everyone that you're with because you're with them a lot and you're eating, during your days. So I was frustrated. There was a couple rungs above me and I felt like I was doing all the work and not getting any credit. I wasn't going to the meetings that I wanted to go to. And I really don't know how to be anything but direct. And he knew, there was definitely, something rubbing me the wrong way. And he was like, MP, come on in. What's up? And I was like, I'm doing this and I'm doing this, and this was my idea, and I can do this better. And I just laid it out there. That was something that also, not the reason why I did it. That's supercharged David. That was what, like, he wanted that from everybody. He wanted everyone to want more. That's the kind of leader he was. So nothing changed that day. He wasn't like, oh, Mary Pat, let me get you exactly what you need. It wasn't anything. It was just that he knew where my head was. And I think he might've said to me, like, are you looking outside? And I was like, I might, like, I'm not. And it was like no threat. It was just, I want more. I was probably, I don't know, early 30s. And I just felt like I was doing way too much and not getting any sort of, recognition for it. And the long and short of it was, and I can't tell you the exact timeline, was when somebody made a move and somebody, went to, left the company or went to a different department, and all of a sudden there's a void. And he was like, okay, now go for it. I didn't get a raise or promotion or anything that day. Go do what you said you were going to do. And I was like, okay, I got this. And I was, like I said, nervous sometimes. I knew I had it sometimes. I knew I was like, I can nail this sometimes. And he nurtured me the whole way along to say, okay, no, MP, don't. I used to keep a pad by my bed, and I would wake up with all these thoughts of, did I do this? And did I do that right? And wait, did I do it 3 times? I was supposed to do it. And I would literally sit with him in the morning and say, okay, was this the right move? And he'd say, yeah, all good, totally. Or he'd say, oh, you know what? Let me sort of see if I can help you out with that one, and I'll make a phone call. And so I knew he was supporting me. And, we went and had a great, I'm sure I got tripped up a few times, but I owned it in a way that I was like, this is what I can do. And I got promoted after it. It was like I said, I was tested. Again, I wasn't necessarily thinking about the end result at the time. I was just like, oh, the door's open. I'm stepping all the way in.
And it sounds like to me too, you said before, you were sharing it was almost like you were transparent when you were having misses. If you messed up, you told him. You weren't afraid. You owned it. I
had to, because you're exposed in events. You know this. It's like you can't say you did something and not do it, because every cog in the wheel matters. So I that is who I am as a person, but it was what I had to do for every detail to know that I wasn't missing anything. Or I'd say, you know what, did I do this right? I had to make a decision on the spot. And he'd say, yes or no, and that's also, it's the best, it's the hardest, but it's the best way to learn. I said it on the day that I left the NFL. I said, literally, you would never see me make the same mistake twice. I tend to personalize mistakes probably too much. So, I could count and probably give you by year every big one that I made that I'd be like, oh, I could still sort of get myself in a twirl about it. And that's what I would never make it again. I would know if it was something that I was like, I will never make that mistake again twice. So it was a great way for me to also learn the hard way, right? And then, sometimes it is the best way to learn. There was not a lot of coddling per se. There was help, but it wasn't like, oh, let me help. It was, here's another layer, and now we need you to go do this. And here's another piece. And, the work never really ended. But, I was at a time in my life. I was young. I was single. That's what I was doing. I would go to the gym at 10 o'clock at night. Who cares? Now I'm in bed at 10 o'clock at night. But at that time, it didn't matter that I worked until 10 and then worked out, right? That was sort of the life I was living.
Let's think about this. You went from a manager to a VP in the NFL, which is not easy to do. And what I'm hearing is you used your voice. When you wanted something, you asked for it. I
would also add to that, I was encouraged to speak up there.
Say more about that.
I was encouraged to have a voice, whether it was the commissioner or other executives, male or female. They would ask me what I thought. I was asked for my opinion. I was asked, what do I think of this? It wasn't, I was butting in. I certainly did sometimes, but I was encouraged.
You were encouraged. And what I hear you telling other women who are listening to this is, if you're not encouraged, use your voice. Speak up. I got that advice, and it's worked really well for me and my career.
Yes, 100%.
So if we had to look back at your amazing career, what's one thing you would do differently?
Oh God, there's a lot. I think. One thing I would do differently. Well, all right, I'll give you a couple short ones. I think I wish I had more patience when I was younger in my career. I think what having children did for me personally was make me more patient. So I was demanding of, the people that worked around me, and maybe I could have been more patient with them at times. I tended to, when I was younger, say, okay, well, you're not doing this way. I'll just do it. Right. And then as I got older, I realized, and I matured in professionally and personally, I realized that, doing it for someone doesn't help them and help them through it, teach a little bit more than, you do. So that would be one thing. The other thing that's sort of, I have a little bit of one of those pangs that I should have done more was, I wish, because I was a woman who had been there for a long time, people came to me, whether it was for advice about, their family balance or life balance or their careers. So women came to me and asked me for advice or whatever. And I was happy to share anything. I had different, people who I would, sort of check in with, but I never formalized anything like that. And I sort of wish when I was there that I was on female panels and things when I was there, but I was always invited. I never did the inviting. And so I guess I wish I had come up with, let's have this sort of peer mentor group that we can all discuss, and whether it changes every month or I was just someone who was like, oh, okay, I'll do that for you, instead of sort of doing it myself. I did it unofficially in a lot of ways with a lot of women that I worked with in my department and outside of my department, but I didn't formalize it in any way. And I feel like maybe if I had, there could have been a little bit, I don't know, we could have communicated a little better. We could have been maybe less afraid to, raise your hand and say something if you were worried or that sort of thing.
I like that. So it's almost like these panels were happening and these things were new and they're just kind of being created. And it's almost like you wish you created, if I'm hearing you correctly, created your own, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
so,
I just kept it sort of freewheeling instead of really, and I'm an event planner, so I should have sort of said, oh, let me put this all together and we'll talk, to these folks and make this something, instead of it being like, oh, let's meet for a cup of coffee and let's talk about, life and family or career, or what should I do? I think I should go for this job. Like, it just could have been maybe more formalized and maybe had a little bit more legs to it than just sort of someone's coming in and me giving out some advice.
Yes, I love that. And that kind of leads to my next question, because I sense a lot of women just in discussions that I'm having and happy hours I'm having with people, women in sports, everybody with this racial awakening happening in our country, everybody I talk to wants to take action. The only difference between the women is some people aren't sure what to do, right?
Right.
What advice would you give them as they're sitting here, and they're sitting at home, probably not in an office, and just trying to figure out, how can they make a difference within their organization, right? How can they make sure things are, now that it's not trending socially on, social media platforms, how do they make a difference?
Yeah, I think what I mean, and I agree, it is an long overdue awakening. And I think there's so much good that can come out of it. I think one of the most important things is awareness. And I say that in the way of, if I was your boss and you reported to me and you were, one of, 5 women that reported to me, it's my job or an executive job to say, what does this group look like, right? Are they all men of a certain age? Are they all women? Is everyone? And that should happen naturally as opposed to making it such a conscious decision. I think that's the way that we're going. So I think this is also a time to be patient and tolerant. And this stuff, I think, will make dramatic changes, but I don't think it's going to happen from today to tomorrow. So I think if you feel strongly about something, you should share those thoughts in the right forum, well thought out. This isn't go, bang your fist on the table and sort of say, and I've been thinking this for so long, right? Because then you sort of seem like you're not really differentiating yourself with some meaning. And I think little things make a big difference. And so I don't necessarily think it has to be, there has to be, a woman on every panel that, you're going to have at your company, because it's just
we need to start thinking about how diversity only helps, and it helps everyone. It helps the people at the top, and it helps the people that are the folks that are doing the work. I've had so many instances in my career where someone has come up and pointed something out to me that I may never have known, whether it was male, female related, color related, religion related. There's always something that you can learn. And I think that if you just keep the additive result of those little differences that everyone makes, I think can really be something powerful. So, but you don't want to be the total bandwagoner, and you got to do it for the right reasons. You got to look inside and say, this needs to come from people's hearts and their minds. It's not just because this other company said they were going to do this or this. It's got to be important to everyone. So I know that seems a little generic, but I think that's like, it's really got to be something that I think it's like little things over little things over little things. And then you look back, like I said, you look in the rearview mirror and you're like, wow, look what we just did. Right?
Yes, I think that's great advice. And then, Mary Pat, $1 million question. Everyone listening is wondering, what is next for you?
Oh my gosh. I know. I wish I had the answer to that, right? Or the $1 million. Look, I always said when I left, I was never leaving to, go work at a competitor. I was never going to, leave and go back. It was really to be home and be with my kids for a certain time. I will say, though, I've told everyone that's ever asked, oh, I'll work again. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that would never work again. It's just not, it's part, I think, of who I am. I will tell you, though, that the pandemic has changed my progression on it a lot, because even if I said, hey, Jahaan, can I come help you, at your next whatever, I can't get there. It's not safe. And so it's given me a little bit more time to sort of figure out what it is. I'll be honest, though, I don't know if it will be events. I don't know if it will be sports. I don't know. I feel like all my good ideas, my husband always says, yeah, someone just did that. Or I'm always like, gosh, I'm always behind on the really good ideas. So I do think that for right now, what I did was I became my daughter's assistant basketball coach. And I had always said that I was going to, when I did retire, I was going to coach Lily at basketball. I'm sure she wishes I'd go back to work, but she's sort of stuck with me. So I don't have my plan fully formulated. And I think I'm going to handle this one, Jahaan, like I did the rest of it. I feel like it's going to come to me, and I'm going to know, and I'm going to feel passionate and empowered by, certain things. I would love to do something on my own, like maybe like you're doing. I'd love to do it. I'm just not going to do that right at this very moment. And I don't exactly know what it means, but that's really where I think my heart will lead me.
I like that. And if you do write a book, not that you said anything about a book, but if you do write a book, I will certainly purchase it and 100% read it.
You're kind. You might be the only one.
Stop it. All right. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you.
We're old school. So I've got an email address, right? I know it's like, I'm like dating myself. So my email address is my married name, which most people don't know, which is Garate, which is like karate with a G. That's the way everybody remembers it. So my email address is GARATE, the letter L, at optonline.net. That's the best way. I was terrible with LinkedIn. I was never on that. I am not good with Instagram. I mean, I'm on it, but I more just appreciate what everyone else is posting rather than post. Uh-huh. I know I'm dating myself, but I need to get more modern. So yeah, so and look, I love, still talking to people, and, there's people over, there's certain people that I said goodbye to, and a few that I'm sure I missed along the way. So, but I'm honored to even be asked to be here, especially since I am a year-long retiree. So thank you for even spending the time to talk and ask questions.
No, thank you. We could talk to you for hours because
I talk a lot. That's why.
But you are giving great advice, and just listening to your journey, I think is incredible. And I'm sure there are women out there who want me to keep talking because it's empowering and inspiring. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.